It began with a love of the sea and turned into the journey of a lifetime. 4 men on watercraft going around Australia. Everyone said they'd never make it. Just because it had never been attempted before didn't mean it couldn't be done. Austrek, an adventure to circumnavigate the Australian continent on personal watercraft in 12 weeks to raise funds for the Sydney Adventist Hospital's cancer support facilities.
I think that we're going to go away leaving 6 foot tall and come back 7 foot tall.
My name's Paul. As Managing Director of the Hospital Foundation, I was looking for a way to take our cancer appeal to a national level. I'll be pretty much heading up the whole operation and trying to steer the ship.
Physically, mentally, I think I'm ready. Just about jumping out of my skin to get going.
My name's Lyndon and I'm an accountant. I came up with the idea for Austrek after a close relative died from cancer. I'll be in charge of logistics.
You can film this body in 2 months, mate, when I look like Arnie, but not now.
My name's Brad. I run my own import-export company. I joined Austrek because I wanted to prove that there is life after cancer. I was diagnosed with leukemia 9 years ago and was told that I only had 3 months to live. My role on the team is the navigation and safety aspects of the water.
Mate, ready. Born ready.
That's quite good, isn't it? Yeah.
My name's Randall, but everyone calls me George. If you get that mixed up, you can call me anything you like. Just don't call me late at night.
Yeah, okay, we've got one more to go.
I work with watercraft all the time, so when Paul and Lyndon told me about the project, I wanted to be involved. My job will be to maintain all the craft and to make sure they are going to last the whole trip.
Riding a personalised watercraft is unlike any other sport. The team trained for 5 to 6 months before leaving. Lyndon carefully scheduled to start with 150 kilometres a day, building up to 200 kilometres by the end of the first week. The plan was to ride 8 to 10 hours a day, 6 days a week, for 12 solid weeks. George had custom-built the craft with long-range fuel tanks, backup batteries, GPS units, super grip seats and UHF radios.
Mate, we brought enough here to go to fight in Vietnam for about 3 years.
The team were careful to choose one of the most environmentally friendly crafts, using them as a vehicle to raise valuable funds for cancer, and they were only going to be passing through any area once. They would be supported by a backup crew of 10 who would have their own challenges, carrying about 25 tonnes over some 30,000 kilometres. Craig was in charge of the support team. He would plan when to stop, where to stop, and decide how they'd get to the next destination.
Mate, if we don't eat well, we're not going anywhere.
It was up to Barry to keep them well fed.
Well, our only form of cooking is going to be with a barbecue and 3 gas rings, so I guess they're going to get used of some different sort of tucker.
John's boat was going to be their lifeline in the remote areas of northern Australia where road access is very poor.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of trying areas, not only for the boat, but for the riders themselves.
The crew nurse, Darren, would try and preempt any sort of medical drama, but dehydration and sore wrists were one thing. Brad's cancer made it a whole other ballgame.
I don't want to be negative, but I call myself a realist. I think there's a very low chance of all of them making it. I would love to see them all make it. Nothing would give me more joy, and in a funny sort of way, if someone doesn't make it, I will feel like a failure myself.
For extra guidance, an Aboriginal artist wished them safe passage.
This is water dreaming. So when these boats go on their journey, we send them protection, you know.
One of my friends once paid me the biggest compliment that he ever could, and he said, "Paul, is there anything you don't think you can do?"
Looking forward to seeing a lot of Australia. And I think we'll have the opportunity to see it in a way that very few Australians will get the chance to do so.
We had these jet pilot wetsuits here, specially designed with a zipper in them so we can just pull up at any time. Or if you're good enough one-handed, you can just whip it out as you ride.
It's a beautiful day, so we're away.
Have you got any feelings trying to live in? This is going to be the hardest part, saying goodbye to this one.
No nerves. Not ready to go, but no nerves anyway, so
We'll be right.
I'll see you soon, mate.
The sheer scope of Austrek is mind-blowing when you consider that Australia is roughly the same size as mainland USA. The first leg of the trip would take them approximately a week, travelling about 980 kilometres up the east coast of Australia from Sydney to Brisbane. The team left on a glorious spring day from Sydney Harbour. The road crew would split into two teams. One would meet them along the way so they could refuel, while the other went ahead to find a suitable place to pull out, then get the camp ready for them by the time they headed in.
I think one of the best things we've done is to choose the right people for the jobs. So when there's been a problem, everybody bucks in and work out the best way to get through the problem.
Riding out on the open ocean is tough work. You need strength in your arms and legs and to hold your head up while reading the ever-changing conditions. You also have to be able to shift your body weight and throttle control to avoid being thrown off. Brad's greatest fear was whether he could physically do it. Mentally, he knew he was capable, but the ravages of chemotherapy meant he wasn't a strong man anymore. It was harder than they'd ever imagined. Every muscle in their bodies ached. Their backs, legs and arms felt like they'd been beaten to a pulp. The riders were so relieved to hook up with the road crew and get off the craft at the end of the day. Their wrists and hands were so sore they could barely grip anything.
Just keep remembering what we're doing it for, mate. That'll keep us going.
Darren did his best to get them a good night's sleep.
Well, the snore is in one central location. You, Steve, Andrew.
Doesn't taste too bad at all, actually. Quite surprised we get a little bit of Kahlua or some Baileys in that. We'll have ourselves a good drink.
After tucking into some freshly caught local cuisine, they realised they may never be able to manage 250 kilometres a day. But even to have reached Brisbane was to silence many of the critics who'd claimed it could never be done. The next goal was to reach Darwin in 4 weeks, roughly 5,800 kilometres away. Life on Austrek was now routine, a daily ritual of checking and rechecking, packing and unpacking. They then faced an 8 to 10 hour battering on seas that were anything but predictable.
Felt like jumping up and down on a pogo stick without the spring.
Mate, I drank too much and I ate too much and I'm paying for it today.
Oh, mate, the ride was terrible. I didn't enjoy it at all.
Yeah, it's hard. It's just hard going.
The support crew wasn't finding it much easier.
First tyre.
The hardest part was knowing they'd be back out there doing it all again tomorrow, although Lyndon did see a bright side.
See these? Hopefully they'll be a lot bigger by the end of the trip.
Oh, if I wasn't away from the weight down.
The highlight of the day was dinner. It meant they could plan the next day, then look forward to a good night's sleep.
And the tide's still on its way in, so that'll be really good.
George's free time was spent maintaining the craft, though he always managed to call his wife, who was pregnant with their first child. The team's hard work was paying off as media interest grew nationwide. Australians began to tune in to find out the latest on the Aussie adventure with Hawes. Their next stop, Queensland's majestic Great Barrier Reef.
Watching the world pass you by.
2,000 kilometres in length, the area boasts the most extensive coral reef system in the world, as well as being the largest formation created solely by a living organism.
But now that you waited, the cartel materialized. Believe me when I say, now's the time, feel the freedom. Nothing can stand in the way. Now's the time, feel the freedom. Crossroads, will you sell your soul for the ride? Yeah, to join in that club will come at the cost of compromise. Yeah, your feet leave the ground, now you're wearing the devil's disguise. Soon you discover, come all you once despised. Yeah, believe me.
The reef was as far north as some of them had been in their lives, so anything beyond that was uncharted territory. They never imagined they'd get there on watercraft.
I might just let you guys go, eh?
Lunch out there, with what had to be the best view in the world, wasn't bad either. Overpriced restaurants? Eat your heart out. If only the rest of the trip could be this idyllic. They quickly learned they were able to lessen the impact of the waves by bending their legs while they stood. But Brad didn't have the strength to stand, so he suffered the full brunt of the pounding, sitting down. Worse still, the craft's supergrip seats became like sandpaper against his bruised backside.
Just me bum, mate. Just me bum. It's got to get better soon. It can't be getting worse.
His painful backside rash made it hard to concentrate as he felt every wave, every bump, every turn.
It's not good, mate. I just took my mind off the ski for a while. And it dropped down really hard, so I think I've popped the rib cartilage. So I'm going to nip into hospital and see that it's not broken, and if it's cartilage, we'll make sure we get some decent painkillers or something.
Just facing the wall, left shoulder touching, hands on your head, elbows to the front and the nose.
It turned out Brad had broken 2 ribs. They couldn't believe it the next day when Brad insisted on continuing.
We're going to be away for 5 or 6 days now, and we'll have contact, but no link up with crew, so spare parts, breakdowns, all of that starts to really play on our minds.
The riders were headed into the Gulf of Carpentaria with only their boat as support for about 2,000 kilometres.
I think it's congratulations to George. He got us all here today. Fixing outboard motors. The man is a legend. The biggest problem is he knows it. I don't know if he even...
Being so isolated, finding fuel became a daily challenge.
Five-star service.
They'd gone back to the days of the early explorers, living off the land and sleeping under the stars. They were living out every man's dream of danger, adventure, and wide open seas.
It looks like fish.
Yeah, bring it over.
The things I'm missing out on the changes in my little daughter.
When you slow down, that's what I'm missing.
Sue's flat out looking after the 2 kids and running the business, and when I'm sitting in an idyllic spot like this, I feel very guilty about it.
Yeah. S-E-X.
Then they crashed into a reef.
Made a horrible thud sound, and then I gunned it again and it was all rattly, so expert George reckons it's probably a drive shaft.
Put in the same spot tomorrow, so there's no chance of us running out the same reef.
Wow.
This is not our planned stop for the day. It's about 50 kilometres short. Paul was riding along through the waves and noticed the ski had got extra heavy.
Oh, it's got a leak in it somewhere.
We knew we had some bad fuel, but we didn't know we got a full tank of mud.
George didn't have the facilities to properly do repairs, so he had to somehow patch things up with what tools and spare parts they had. They were still days away from the city of Darwin, so George had to make sure the craft would last until then.
Oh, it'll be worse today. It'll be worse.
John called to say the boat had run aground on an outgoing tide. Here, the tide can stay out for 2 weeks, so they knew they had to act quickly.
Oh, geez, they're fast flies, aren't they? They keep up there at 60 k's.
They decided to use the combined strength of their craft against the weight of the boat.
I don't know, it'll be touch and go.
Fortunately, they managed to get the boat afloat, but with their crafts and bodies taking a beating, they wondered which would give out first.
I've had enough of Austrek now and decided I was going to slash my wrists and end it.
The old ribs have been playing up a bit, but nothing shows up that was worth particularly worrying about.
This is putting a band-aid on a finger.
This is some of the interaction we had with the wildlife. I'm not giving in. I'm going to go around in a wheelchair if I have to.
How's that feeling, mate?
It's great.
It's no injuries, no deep thoughts. Just press on.
They underestimated the danger of crocs. They had thought about taking guns and all sorts of things to protect themselves. But crocs strike so quickly and unexpectedly.
Big croc. A big croc. Looked at me as if I was lunch.
They kept a campfire going through the night, believing this would keep them away.
We had a visitor. 4 o'clock visitor. A lizard visitor.
Next thing I hear this huge bang and
Oh my God, there's a croc in the camp!
Crocs can get you whether you're on land or halfway up a tree or in the water. They can attack you as long as they know where you are. Now, well into the tropics, temperatures regularly exceed 40 degrees Celsius. It's no coincidence that Australia has the highest rate of skin cancer in the world.
I think I copped a bit of sunburn on my legs today. I didn't listen to our crew nurse, Darren. He'll be into me tonight, that's for sure.
A couple of them are taking it on board, but they're still not really that serious about sunscreen yet. And you can joke about it, but it still is a serious thing. George is just an idiot, but that's fine.
I put it on, it just washes off. It's a bit different. When you're in the road crew, you get to sit in an air-conditioned cab. You might get a little bit of the sunshine through the bonnet, but out on the water, you put as much of the stuff on as you can, and it just washes straight off. So, tell him to go and shove it.
The rash on Brad's backside developed into painful boils.
I'm trying to find like a rubber duck or something like that. But if Brad can sit on that there, have it around the front of his, just the top of his thighs, I reckon it could take the heat off his toe.
Paul had his own worries. One of his sandfly bites became infected and he had to be put on intravenous antibiotics.
So this is the flu clock, so we'll give this again at 4.
The riders were only a couple of days from Darwin, where Brad would be able to get proper treatment. So it was just this last stretch of the Northern Territory to go. In Arnhem Land, they were warmly welcomed by the Aboriginal community. The kids had never seen a craft before, so they took them out for a ride, and their enjoyment was contagious.
We just had a call from Randall, and one of the skis has taken on water, so we're not sure where that puts us now.
That's cool. We're changing skis, are we?
Yeah, we need one of the spare ones in, fuel ready to go. The boys are coming round the corner now.
Brad's craft broke down just as they were approaching Darwin. As he came in the rest of the way on the boat, it was clear he was in real trouble. A lot of pus had started to come out of his sores, and his body was starting to turn septic.
Is this it for Brett Rosen?
No, you have to shoot me.
As the rest of the team waited for news on Brad, they were reluctant to deal with the situation. They had all made a pact before leaving that they would allow each other 2 sick days. Any more than that would compromise their mission. Brad had taken his 2 days, but no one was willing to make the hard call.
either way?
No, I don't think we can say that just yet.
We can't?
Because we need to know Brad's condition. Is that... Paul?
His condition could very quickly change to critical.
The riders were still trying to come up with a workable solution when Brad rang and asked to see them.
Oh no.
Morning, Brad.
Well, I assume you guys have figured why I've asked to see you, because things for me aren't as good as they should be. I didn't quite realise how bad this was in my backside. I've got a big cavity in there that's got stuff packed in it. If I was to continue to ride, I'd be risking life, so... Yeah. I'm basically septic. I don't know whether you got the background, but when I went in to have a really simple op here, I spewed up. I had to get it all out. I've got a chest infection now and all sorts of crap. So.
They all just want so bad to see you do as much as you can.
I could stand a big chance of sliding you guys up, or more dramas, and you guys are fit and ready to go. I just think it's best. I've done as much as I can do now, and can't say much more.
Do you need us to make any decisions?
No.
Or did you just need to tell us what you wanted to do?
I just needed to tell you where I sat on it. Yeah. And to say I appreciated you hanging around, and I've taken my 2 days and I can't get back on. Rather than you guys hanging around, I think you better go. Seeing the weather forecast, you better get out of here.
Well guys, after 7 weeks, we are now finally new world record holders. Travelled 8,131 kilometres. We needed to do 8,111 to make a record. So we've broken the record and we've already set a new one. And that's only half of it.
They'd done it. They were the new world record holders for the longest journey ever on personal watercraft. The team had wanted this badly, so their first victory was very sweet. But the second world record was still another 8,000 kilometres away. The west coast was teeming with sharks up to 3 metres long. While they had seen sharks everywhere they went, as they skied over clear, shallow water, seeing them just centimetres away from their feet was beyond terrifying.
Tell me it's a fish, someone, please.
It's not a crocodile, that's for sure.
The riders soon learned the ocean is what it is. You have to respect it. If you try and fight it, it will always win. They got water forced practically.
The wind's very strong and it's starting to rain fairly heavily. So here we are again at Austrek Lodge for another whole day.
They'd made it through so much, but it was boredom that really got to them.
We're about 3 weeks behind, and everyone really wants to get home in a bit of a hurry to see family and friends and whatever. So everyone's probably getting a bit testy as well. Not that we're sick of the trip, but yeah, we're sick of the trip.
Unfortunately, while Brad had returned to good health, He had lost his fitness and was worried he might slow them down. They had a month's riding on top of him and were still averaging 350 kilometres a day. He promised to be ready to rejoin them past Adelaide in South Australia. The road crew were relieved to have seen the last of unmarked dirt roads. As they scouted around for a place to camp for the night, they came across a small stranded whale. None of them had ever saved a whale before, so they considered letting nature take its course, but figured it would return if it were intentionally beached. They tried pulling it first until they felt how much it weighed. It must have sensed what they were trying to do, as the minute they touched it and tried to move it, it would kick as well. It probably took them a good hour, but eventually it was able to kick free. It's a moment the riders will remember for the rest of their lives. Brad rejoined the team in Adelaide. He had trained almost every day since Perth and was rock solid. As they crossed into Victoria, they rode past the magnificent...
It's about time I come back or I'd have no clothes or anything. You gonna let him do it again?
Let Lyndon?
Yeah.
No. He's housebound for the next 5 years.
Would you do it again, mate?
Oh, I think I would. I'm only young.
Yeah, but the question,
plenty of time.
Michael, is will he be allowed to do it again?
Paul Thur.
Other than that, yada, yada, yada.
Lyndon Parmenter.
This is definitely not what I ordered, Andrew.
Randall, a.k.a. George Jones.
Nothing like a couple of witchy grubs for lunch. Some crocodile mud. And a couple of beers.
And Bradley Fraser.
For the first time in 10 years, I'm not in remission anymore. I'm fully clear of leukemia. No BCR Abelson gene at all, so what you put that down to, but I had it when I left on Austrek and I didn't have it when I got home.
They had started off naive, determined, perhaps visionary. They finished stronger, wiser, and infinitely more confident. They were just ordinary guys trying to achieve something extraordinary.